Think positive.
Welcome, or welcome back to the Goyle Ambrose podcast, GA for short. I'm your host, Prince. This is a space for inner work, self-improvement, self-discovery, mindset, accountability, integrity, reflection, and personal development. This podcast is built for growth, for honesty, and for becoming a better version of yourself one day at a time. New episodes drop every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Today's episode is called Creation. Creation is strange. Ideas appear from places you cannot explain. One moment, nothing is there. The next moment, something exists. A thought, a direction, a possibility, and it feels like it came out of nowhere. But anyone who creates knows that feeling. Those sparks, those moments where something suddenly appears inside your mind. Not slowly, not logically, just suddenly there. Almost like your mind opened a door you didn't know existed. And behind that door was an idea waiting. Creativity rarely begins with the full picture. It begins with a spark, a small flash, a single thought, something incomplete, something rough, something unfinished. But inside the small spark is potential. Inside that spark could be a story, a song, a project, a vision, something that didn't exist in the world until that moment appeared in your head. Every creation that has ever existed began this way. Small, quiet, almost invisible, a spark. Sometimes the sparks come quickly, one after another. A thought appears, then another, almost like your mind is lighting matches in the dark. Ideas flashing, connections forming, pieces moving into place. And in those moments, creation feels alive, energy moving through your thoughts. Momentum building. You don't always know where it's going, but you know something is happening, and you follow it, spark after spark. Ideas have a strange nature. They don't stay forever. They come and they go. Sometimes an idea arrives and feels powerful, clear, exciting, and then if it is ignored, it fades, replaced by something else. Another thought, another distraction, another moment, and sometimes that same idea never returns. Creation moves quickly, thoughts move quickly, and the mind is always moving forward. The strange thing about creativity is how often ideas appear out of nowhere. You are not always looking for them. Sometimes you are walking, sometimes you are driving, sometimes you are sitting quietly, and suddenly something appears, a concept, a phrase, a direction, and it feels like it came from nowhere. But that is how creativity often works. It moves quietly beneath the surface of the mind, waiting for the right moment to appear, and or setting. Inside the head of creativity, there's constant movement, thoughts building on other thoughts, ideas forming connections, images appearing, questions forming, possibilities expanding. It is not always organized. It is not always clear, but it is alive. Creation is not always a straight path. Sometimes it is chaotic. Sometimes it's confusing. But within that movement, something begins to take shape. Many people believe creativity means forcing something into existence. But most creators understand something different. Creation is not always forced. Sometimes it's discovered. The creator is searching, listening, watching the mind closely, waiting for something that feels real, something that feels alive, something that feels worth building. And when that moment arrives, the creator embraces it. There is always a moment where something clicks, an idea suddenly makes sense. Pieces that once felt separate begin connecting. The direction becomes clearer. Energy builds. The mind starts moving faster. And suddenly, what once felt like a small spark begins turning into something more. Something real. Something that wants to exist beyond the mind. Something that wants to become creation. If you ever talk to someone who creates often, you may hear them say something interesting. They might pause and say, "I don't know how to explain it. It just happens. The ideas just keep coming." And the truth is, that feeling is real. Creation can feel like something is flowing through your mind. Thought after thought, idea after idea, one spark leading to another. And when someone asks where it comes from, sometimes the only honest answer is this: it's unexplainable. It just happens. And somehow, it keeps coming. The strange thing about creativity is that it cannot always be explained. Where do ideas come from? Why does one idea stay while another disappears? Why does something suddenly feel meaningful? Why does something suddenly make sense? There are no perfect answers. Creation is mysterious. It moves in ways logic cannot always describe. It appears without warning and disappears just as quietly, which is why when an idea arrives, the creator must be ready. Because ideas are fragile. They exist in moments. A thought today may disappear tomorrow. A spark today may fade by the next hour, which is why creators learn something important. Capture the idea, write it down, speak it, record it, hold on to it, because creation often arrives in moments that pass quickly. Even though creativity can feel powerful, there are moments where it slows down, moments where the sparks stop appearing, moments where the mind feels quiet, still, empty. Ideas that once flowed easily suddenly feel distant. Creation can stall. A slump appears. And in those moments, it may feel like something has been lost, like the door that once opened so easily has suddenly closed. But slumps are part of the creative process because creativity moves in cycles. There are moments of flow and moments of silence, moments of movement and moments of stillness. Both are part of the creation process. Something interesting happens when a person begins creating consistently. Ideas begin arriving more often. Thoughts begin connecting faster. Sparks appear more frequently. One idea leads to another. One creation leads to the next. Momentum begins to build. The mind becomes active, creative, open, and the process becomes easier with time. Creation begins feeding more creation. Eventually, something changes. Creation no longer feels rare. Ideas begin appearing regularly. The mind becomes a place where thoughts are constantly forming, concepts arriving, directions forming, possibilities appearing, and it almost feels endless, as if creativity has opened a door that cannot be closed, a place where ideas continue arriving again and again. After a while, you start realizing something about that experience. It's difficult to explain to someone who hasn't felt it, because from the outside it might look random. It might look like ideas are simply appearing out of nowhere, thoughts forming suddenly, concepts arriving unexpectedly. But from the inside, it feels different. It feels like something has finally opened, like the mind has reached a place where creation no longer needs to be forced, where thinking no longer feels like effort, where ideas seem to move freely without resistance. And the strange part about that stage is you can't always point to the exact moment it began. One day ideas felt distant. Another day they felt closer. And then eventually they just kept coming, almost like something quietly shifted. And once that shift happens, the way you begin to understand the process itself starts to change. When you're moving through a process like this, you start realizing that everyone experiences it differently. Some people move quickly. Some people take longer. Some people recognize things early. Others don't see them until much later. And none of those paths are necessarily wrong, because every mind processes things differently. Every person notices different details. Every person arrives at an understanding in their own time. Once you begin to see that, you stop measuring your progress against someone else's. You stop comparing timelines, because you realize that the process was never meant to look the same for everyone. Another thing that starts becoming clear is how much perspective can change over time. Something that once felt confusing eventually begins to make sense. Something that once felt complicated eventually becomes simple. And sometimes when you look back at earlier moments, you realize you were learning something when you didn't fully understand it yet. That's one of the interesting things about growth. A lot of it only becomes visible in hindsight. When you're inside the moment, it can feel uncertain. But later, you begin to see how those moments were shaping the way you think. Eventually, there comes a moment where the ideas stop just being ideas, because having an idea is only the beginning. At some point, you have to take that thought and begin shaping it into something real. You start working with it, adjusting it, refining it, seeing what it could actually become. Sometimes the idea changes while you're building it. Sometimes it becomes something slightly different than what you first imagined, but that's part of the process. Creation isn't just about the moment an idea appears. It's about what you do with it after that moment, the time you spend developing it, the patience it takes to shape it, and the willingness to keep working with it until it finally becomes something you can share with the world. After all the thinking, observing, and shaping of the ideas, you begin to understand something about the nature of creation itself, because the beginning of every creation is much simpler than people think. Creation, it arrives quietly, a spark, a thought, a moment, something that did not exist suddenly appearing inside the mind. It may feel like it came from nowhere, but those sparks are powerful, because every idea, every story, every invention, every movement, every piece of art, every project, every creation that has ever existed started the same way, a spark inside someone's mind, and in that moment, creation begins. I hope you found something worth taking with you today. Maybe a new perspective, maybe a moment to pause and reflect. Thank you for being here and sharing this space with me. Your presence matters. If this resonated with you, share it with someone you care about, because growth spreads through connection. I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Stay grounded. And as always, be safe.